Chapter 1, Section 3, Breakthroughs to Agriculture. Alright, agriculture is the second great human process after the settlement of the globe. It's called the Neolithic or New Stone Age. And it's also even referred to as the Agricultural Revolution. It started approximately 12,000 years ago with the deliberate cultivation of plants and the domestication of animals. It gradually replaced hunting and gathering in most parts of the world. And this really transformed human life across the planet. That's because agriculture brought a new relationship between humans and other living things. Humans actively changed what they found in nature rather than just using it. They shaped the landscape and even selectively bred animals. Now, the domestication of nature created a new mutual dependence. Many domesticated plants and animals came to rely on humans, and therefore many humans lost their hunting and gathering skills. But this also led to the intensification of living, essentially getting more food and resources from less land. More food led to more people led to greater need for intensive exploitation. Alright, common patterns. Okay, agricultural revolution happened independently in several world regions. The Fertile Crescent of Southwest Asia, several areas in sub-Saharan Africa, China, New Guinea, Mesoamerica, the Andes, Eastern North America. This all happened at about the same time, anywhere from 12,000 to 4,000 years ago. But scholars have struggled with the question of why agriculture developed so late in human history. So the development of agriculture was separate, independent, yet almost simultaneous. Now this happened within the context of 250,000 years of human history. And so that's the struggle with why it developed so late. Now, the agricultural revolution also coincided with the end of the last ice age. The global warming cycle started around 16,000 years ago, as the ice age was over by about 11,000 years ago. And so the end of the ice age also coincided with human migration across the earth. And of course, that logically makes sense. However, that did lead to the extinction of some large mammals as well. And that's really based on climate change and the hunting of those large animals. Now, the climate change, this warming started over 16,000 years ago. Like I said, it was a warmer, wetter weather than before. And there were more stable conditions for human settlement. And this allowed for the flourishing of wild plants and the flourishing of wild plants that could be domesticated. Now, hunting and gathering peoples had already learned many ways to manage the natural world around them. There was a broad spectrum diet. The development of sickles, which is a type of gardening tool, baskets, and other tools to make use of the wild grain in the Middle East. Now in the Amazon, peoples have learned to cut back some of the plants to encourage the growth of the ones that they wanted. And Australians had even built elaborate eel traps. And there is a question of who was really responsible for the innovation of agriculture. And many believe it was women, as traditionally women were the plant gatherers, and they likely led the way towards developing agriculture. As hunters, men likely led the way towards animal domestication. So many communities had long experience collecting plants and trapping animals. Now, these hunting and gathering peoples, because of the cultivation of plants, started to establish more permanent villages, especially in the resource-rich areas. Population growth perhaps led to even a food crisis, and the need to supply food to those who built and maintained the Göbekli Tepe site that we've talked about before. It may have stimulated that agriculture. And so there's even a response to this population growth. Right? The warmer climate at the end of the Ice Age may have allowed for a dramatic population growth of these communities, and that necessitated a more abundant and stable food supply. And so farming may have come after developing a sedentary way of life. That's also possible. I think this is an excellent map. It gives you a visual on the development of agriculture, as you see in the green. These are the independent locations with the development of agriculture. We've got Eastern North America, Mesoamerica, the Andes that we talked about earlier, and even the Amazon River Valley. In Africa, we have the Sudanic Africa, which is now the present-day Sudan. West Africa, and of course the Fertile Crescent, or the Middle East. We have China, and even Southeast Asia, as well as New Guinea, and Oceania. The orange show the early pastoralism, or animal husbandry. This would be the animal domestication. We can see that in Central Asia and the Southwest Steppes. And here with cattle in the Sahara. Of course, everywhere else that you see in that grayish khaki color is the limit of early agriculture. The black arrows, as you can see, spawn off from the green areas. Or is that purple? Maybe it's purple, now that I look at it closer. But that shows you the direction of the spread of agriculture. And then here's a nice list where they've been able to determine, archaeologists and scientists and historians, what plant or animal was domesticated or cultivated. Okay, variations. Agriculture developed in a number of regions, but with some variation. It depended on the plants and animals that were available. Of course, logically that makes sense. And only a few hundred plant species have been domesticated. And you might think that a few hundred is a lot, but there are many, many more species of plants that have not been domesticated. And believe it or not, only 14 large mammal species have been domesticated. Now, in the Fertile Crescent, that's Mesopotamia, that's in the Middle East, that was the first location to have a full agricultural revolution. And that means there was a presence of a large variety of plants and animals to be domesticated. And the transition to agriculture actually there was triggered by a cold and dry spell between 11,000 and 9,000, or excuse me, 9,500 BCE. And thus developed a much more societal sophistication. Humans were using mud bricks to build monuments and shrines. There's even evidence of more elaborate burials and even sophisticated tools. But about the same time, or approximately, that's what that little curvy line means, approximately. At the same time, the domestication started in the Eastern Sahara, which is present-day Sudan. The region was actually much more hospitable 10,000, 5,000 years ago. If you were to look up pictures of the Sudan, you might not find the environment hospitable. But it was definitely a different environment 10,000, 5,000 years ago. There was a domestication of cattle there about 1,000 years before the Middle East and India. In Africa, animals were domesticated first, and elsewhere, the plants were domesticated first. There also was this emergence of several widely scattered farming practices. So, of course, depending on the type or species of plant, as well as the environment, of course, that means there were different farming practices. And African agriculture actually was less productive than the agriculture in the Fertile Crescent, and that also could be a reason for the animals being domesticated first. Now, these multiple sites in Africa have a dramatically different climate than contemporary Africa. That's what I was talking about with the Sudan being much more hospitable a long time ago. The Sahara was wetter and actually fit for human habitation. And that's probably why multiple sites of agriculture developed south of the Sahara, exploiting a plant adapted to that specific region. But there is separate development of agriculture in the Americas. In the Americas, actually, there's an absence of animals that were available for domestication. They lacked cereal grains. Instead, they relied on maize, or what we now know as corn. And the result was a replacement of hunting and gathering with agriculture that took about 3,500 years in Mesoamerica. In the Fertile Crescent, it was relatively quick. It was only about a 500-year transition period, but it took much longer in Mesoamerica. And a large part of that is because the Americas are oriented north and south. The landscape in the Eastern Hemisphere, with the spread of agriculture, is done much more east and west. And that's because in the Americas, the agricultural practices had to adapt to those distinct climate zones in order to spread. Obviously, there are parts of North America alone that are significantly different from each other, as well as in South America. Here's Mesopotamia, or the Fertile Crescent. Here's the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea. Right, here's the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. And this red box up here shows you an in-depth, up-closer, zoomed-in version of what we're looking at. And that gives you a good idea. Of course, this is Africa right here, Europe and Asia. But this is the domestication of plants and animals right here. The first location of a full agricultural revolution. Okay, I thought this is a very interesting picture, and I wanted to include it with your notes here. If you just really stop and think, what does this statue show? And what do you think you might know about its origin? Those are some things to think about. It's actually from present-day Jordan, which is over here, excuse me, on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. It's from present-day Jordan. It was found at the archaeological site Ain Ghazal, one of the largest agricultural settlements between 7200 BC and 5000 BCE. And they found evidence with up to approximately 3,000 inhabitants. They cultivated barley, wheat, beans, peas, and lentils, and they even raised domesticated goats. This site consists of multi-room stone houses. So let's look at the appearance. The statue here features 4 heads, right? Rather long necks, especially on those two. But really, some kind of crudely shaped body shapes. 2 of the heads seem to be attached to one torso, even. Figures probably became, of course, more brittle over time. This is made of lime rock plaster, and so you can see it's starting to crumble, especially at some of the core. And while the neck and torso are crudely shaped, the faces of the figures have very precise features, which is very interesting because it looks like, this may be even made out of something completely different than what the faces are made out of. But at the same time, you see the similar cracks in the head, and so it looks like it's made out of the same material, but the precise features that accentuate the, when this black ink around the eyes, that's incredible. So what do you think this, what about the statue speaks to its site of origin? This is actually made with the bundle of reeds that form the core of these statues, and that may suggest that they were produced by an agricultural community, since reed is a plant. These clear facial features raise the possibility that these are not abstract representations of gods, but maybe ordinary people. The fact that this statue includes 4 figures, which are very similar in size and shape, also suggests that Ain Ghazal, that settlement of almost 3,000 people, developed maybe a sense of sameness, if not equality, because as you'll learn, over time with the domestication and cultivation of plants and animals, human societies became less egalitarian, with the development of distinct classes. So just a couple of things to think about. Thought were very interesting. Remember, we're always trying to think outside the box.